We're picking up with Act 2, Scene 3. There wasn't really anything else in 2-2 that I wanted to discuss. Act 2, Scene 3, we have the Duke of Northumberland, or the Earl of Northumberland, with his wife, called Lady Northumberland, and Hotspur's wife, Lady Percy. Okay? And Northumberland begins, I pray thee, loving wife and gentle daughter, give even way unto my rough affairs. Put not you on the visage of the times, and be like them to Percy, that is me, troublesome. What's he mean? Give way unto my rough affairs. Let me do what I have to do. Okay? Don't put on the visage of the times. That is, don't visually express to me the dire situation and circumstances the kingdom is in. What's he saying? Put it in modern language. Put on a happy face. Make me think everything's going to be fine. Okay? Lady Northumberland, that is his wife, I have given over. I will speak no more. Okay, I will speak no more implies what? She's given him an earful. Do what you will. Your wisdom be your guide. Having been married nearly 40 years, I don't know how long they've been married, but boy, does that sound like my wife. You're going to do what you're going to do, so just go do what you're going to do. Okay? Northumberland, alas, sweet wife, my honor is at pawn. What does it mean to pawn something? What do you do when you go to a pawn shop and you're not going to buy? What are you selling, and what are you selling it for? Okay? Are you literally selling it? No, you're not. You're putting it up for sale, and you receive essentially a token, a ticket, something, so that you can receive the money back. That is, the pawn shop seller gives you money for that thing. You can redeem it by giving the money back. It's essentially what? It's a loan. But what can happen to the thing that you pawn between your bringing money back? It can be bought. Okay? So it is a sale, but it's a sale that you can take back unless it's already sold, in which case you're out. You have the money, but you're out the thing you pawned. So he says, my honor is at pawn. In other words, it's kind of, go away. It's being loaned. He's got to redeem it. But my going, nothing can redeem it. But, except for, unless I go, what's going to happen to his honor? Gone. Obliterated. Lady Percy. Okay. Who else talked about honor a lot? His son, Hotspur. Lady Percy's husband. Lady Percy's dead husband. Oh, yet for God's sake, go not to these wars. The time was, Father, that you broke your word when you were more endeared to it than now. That is, what you mean? You broke your word before, when it was closer to your honor. That is, when you still had your honor before you bonded. When your own Percy, my heart's dear Harry, through many a northward look to see his father bring up his powers. That is, she's kind of implying, there's Hotspur on the battlefield thinking, Dad's going to come. They're going to save the day. I mean, obviously not literally. He knew before the battle they weren't coming. But he did long in vain. He longed for your help. That is, when he set about the rebellion near Shrewsbury, he had what? He had a promise. He had his father's word. He would lead an army to engage the king. And he Who then persuaded you to stay at home? Now, she might be looking at her mother-in-law at that point. Did you talk him into not coming? Who then persuaded you to stay at home? There were 2 honors lost, yours and your son's. Well, how did Hotspur lose his honor? Did he fight valiantly? Yes. Did he fight nobly? In one sense, yes. Rebellion against the king isn't all that noble, but, we'll let that slide. So how did he lose his honor?
Well, everyone thinks he was killed by Falstaff. He was not honorable.
Falstaff killed him, supposedly. And even if they think or know that Prince Hal killed him, that's almost worse. Because how has Prince Hal been carrying himself for the last months, if not years? And I think the implication has probably been a year or so that Hal's been acting the way he's been acting. For yours, the God of heaven, brighten it. That is, for your honor, may God, what does she mean by brighten? You have a car, it's dirty, it's covered in mud and dust. Idiots opened a car wash at the end of my street last year, across Highway 96 from my street. And that thing is going all the time. The people who live at the end of the street, they cannot stand it because it's high-pitched whine and the whole 9 yards. She's saying, dust it off, burnish it, wax it, make it good and shiny again. Well, how does he do that? So, for yours, the God of heaven brighten. May God brighten your honor. She's not saying you, Lord Northumberland, do that. For his, Hotspur, it stuck upon him as the sun in the gray vault of heaven, and by his light did all the chivalry of England move to do brave acts. It was Hotspur's honor when she calls, all the chivalry of England. She means all the knights, all the warriors. It was Hotspur's honor that got them to go to battle. And I don't think she means only on the rebel side. King Henry's side too. Because they realized Hotspur's a mighty warrior. We've got to put down this rebellion. He was indeed the glass wherein the noble youth did dress themselves. That is, he was the model. He was the cover of GQ. Everybody wanted to be like him. He had no legs that practiced not his gait. The he is not referring to, the first he is not referring to Hrothgar. She's referring to all the youth of England, the young men of England. Did what? They tried to swagger and strut like Hotspur did. In speaking thick, which nature made his blemish, became the accents of the valiant. Now, the footnote for speaking thick, totally disagree with. Bevington's footnote says, impulsively, impetuously. Hotspur was from what part of England? His father's name gives it all. Northumberland. Border of Scotland. Okay? Really thick accents. Almost Scottish. Right? Not London accent. Not the polite accent. Not the cultured accent. Okay? I think that's what he means. So that's what she means. So that even the young men start doing what? They start affecting, they start pretending to have these northern accents so that they will sound like him. For those that could speak low and tardily would turn their own perfection to abuse to seem like him. So that in speech, in gait, in diet, what they ate, in affections of delight, what they pretended to enjoy, in military rules, humors of blood, that is, their predispositions, their attitudes and such, he was the mark and glass. The mark, that means the thing to be noted. Okay? And glass, the mirror. the copy and book. Copy is, and book, the book is like this book, and you have a blank book that you're copying from this into this. Why? There's no print at the time that the play is set. Printing press hadn't been invented yet. You want a book, you've got to get the book you want and have someone make a copy of it. Okay? The book would be a manuscript. The copying book that fashioned others. He was the source that everyone modeled themselves after. And him, oh, wondrous him. I mean, this is a wife speaking of her dead husband. And him, oh, wonderful him, oh, miracle of men. We're going to hear Ophelia use similar to language about Hamlet. Him did you leave, second to none, unseconded by you. What does that mean, second to none, unseconded by you? Does yours give a gloss?
Mine just says, in place of that, the best man in the world, unsupported by you.
Okay.
So
In British,
it's not the second to none, it means they're the best.
in British culture, well, it can mean that. Second to none, that is, he's the highest, he's the epitome, unseconded by you. The seconded refers to British dual culture. D-U-E-L, like you're going to engage in a duel. When you engage in a duel, you always appoint a second. That is, the person who will stand in for you if you don't show up. So you chicken out, you're a coward. You don't show up for the duel. Your second, thinking you will show up, if he's not with you at the time, shows up. It's now that person's responsibility to engage in the duel. We're going to see a similar idea. Nope, wrong class. I was mentally in my 3010 course thinking about Lawnfall. Different, never mind. Back to this one. So, unseconded by you. What's she saying? You weren't there. Go ahead, Sky.
You didn't show up to fight when you were with him.
You should have been what? What's the phrase we use when you agree to stand with somebody to engage in battle? After 9/11, Tony Blair flew to the United States. He stood outside the White House on the Rose Lawn with George Bush literally standing shoulder to shoulder. The second is the one who does that. You unseconded him. In other words, you didn't have his back. To look upon the hideous god of war, you left him to look upon the hideous god of war in disadvantage, to abide afield where nothing but the sound of Hotspur's name did seem defensible. Like only Hotspur's name was the defense that they could give. So outnumbered, so overmanned, etc. So you left him. Okay. Young daughter-in-law speaking to aged, one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, father-in-law. These are taunting words. Never, oh never, do his ghost the wrong to hold your honor more precise and nice with others than with him. Do not go to war seconding others, supporting others, when what? When you left your son out to dry. Leave them alone. The marshal, the archbishop, they're strong. Had my sweet Harry had but half their numbers. That is, if Harry had had half the numbers of the Archbishop of York, today might I, hanging on Hotspur's neck, that is, arms around him, what? Have talked of Monmouth's grave. And that kind of implies, the word has gotten around, Harry Monmouth killed Hotspur, not Falstaff. Northumberland, beshrew your heart. My gloss says, a reproachful oath It means shut up. How dare you speak to me in that way? Beshrew your heart, fair daughter. You do draw my spirits from me with new lamenting ancient oversights. What does that mean, you draw my spirits from me? She's essentially said he was what towards his son's battle? I'm trying to think of ways to elicit the right word. He showed what instead of bravery? Cowardice. She's pulling his honor and his brave spirits out there, like she's leeching those from him. But I must go and meet with danger there. In other words, she ought to be doing what? Coach, it's halftime. You're down by 2. Give them the pep talk. Or it will seek me in another place and find me worse provided. Fly to Scotland, his wife says. It's not far. It's literally 30 miles from Alnwick, which is where the castle is, to Scotland. Maybe 30 miles. Fly to Scotland, until that the nobles and the armed commons have of their puissance made a little taste, have of their power. Let them engage in a skirmish. When we find out how that goes, then maybe go. What's dependent upon the maybe go? If they do well in a skirmish, then you supply troops. If it looks like they're going to win, then you go. Lady Percy, Hotspur's wife. If they get ground advantage of the king, that is, if they push the king back, if they have the advantage over the king, then join with them. Well, what kind of warrior would that show Northumberland to be? Not very honorable, not very noble, not very strong. Then join you with them like a rib of steel. We would say like a steel spine, to make strength stronger. But for all our loves, that is mine, your wife's, first let them, and there's that word, try. What does she mean by first let them try themselves? We don't usually use this word, try, in the meaning she means. Prove. Let them prove themselves. Let them test themselves. A trial is what? A proving, a testing. You're proving and testing what? The truth of, or innocence of, someone who's being accused of something. So did your son. He was so suffered. So came I a widow, and never shall have length of life enough to reign upon remembrance with mine eyes. What does that mean, to reign upon remembrance with mine eyes? Cry. The rain will be her tears. Why will she be crying? Remembering her husband. That it may grow and sprout as high as heaven for recordation to my noble husband. Northumberland, come on, let's go inside. 'Tis with my mind as with the tide swelled up unto his height, that makes a still stand, running neither way. In other words, his mind is at high tide. Okay? Meaning, it's not low and it's not overrunning something. He's equivocating. He's of two minds. I don't know which way I should go. Fain would I go to meet the archbishop. In other words, I really want to go with him. I want to go with him into battle. But many thousand reasons hold me back. I will resolve for Scotland. Well, he sure decided quickly. That took what, 10 seconds? There am I till time and vantage crave my company. That's kind of how Hotspur getting ready to fight at Shrewsbury. He was craving his company. But what did Hotspur not have? Time and vantage. Who's more noble? The son is far more noble than his father. His father's what? One of you on the quiz used this word. I graded the quiz, you should have gotten a notice about it. The quiz of that word the week before spring break, because I forgot about it entirely. Hal comes across in that first soliloquy as what? One of you used this word. Might not have been one of you, might have been one of the 2 or 3 who isn't here. Duplicitous. He's doing what? He's putting on an act. He's not really friends with Falstaff and Peto and Bardolph and Pwans and Mistress Quickly and Doll and the other whores at the tavern and such. Okay? He's just acting out. He's playing a game. 2-4 we're going to skip. Other than one line, 234. Falstaff says to Doll, "Peace, good Doll, do not speak like a death's head. Do not bid me remember mine end." What's a death's head? Memento mori, which means it can be variously translated. A reminder of death, or remember your death. It can be translated, like I said, or interpreted a variety of ways. Literally, it is something. It is physically something. It can be a skull or a picture of a skull. Look at all the great portraits of Shakespeare's day, beginning around 1550, actually a little bit earlier than that, 1500, late 1400s, up to about 1700. You'll have somebody dressed in all his or her finery, you know, the Queen, a great scholar. There's a fantastic one of Erasmus, Dutch scholar, okay? And it's of Erasmus dressed in all of this finery, like his college robes, okay, that he teaches in and such. But in the picture, there is a skull also, okay? The skull is an indicator that here you are in all your great glory. This is what you become. It's it. Hamlet, the play, batters this idea over and over and over again. Shakespeare's hammering into his audience's mind. Bear in mind, it's written to be seen. It's not written to be read. Okay? He's hitting again and again. You're all gonna die. Learn and deal with and accept it now. All that means, learn, deal, accept, prepare now. Okay? Why does Falstaff say, do not speak like a death's head? Do not bid me remember mine end. He still wants to enjoy life. How old is Falstaff? He's pretty old. He's in his 50s. Okay? Remember, Shakespeare died at 52. It's not the common age for one to die at. Shakespeare died, for his day, actually, that was somewhat young. I mean, most ages were in the 60s. Okay? So, go on to 3. Act 3. Page 849 in this edition. King comes in his nightgown. All right? When I saw this play in London, what year was that? 2013, I believe it was. Michael Gambon, Dumbledore, if you're familiar with the Harry Potter movies, all the later ones, played Falstaff with a pillow and everything. What's that guy's name? Matthew McFadden played Prince Hal, okay? And the guy who plays Argus Filch in the Harry Potter movies was the king. was Henry IV. Perfect. Wonderfully cast. I didn't care for Michael Gambon, largely because they moved me up to the very front row, which was nice. I mean, I'm literally like as far as I am to Ethan. And he's spitting. I mean, literally spitting his lines. I'm sitting there wiping stuff off. But it's a great production. They did both part 1 and part 2. I can't remember who played Hotspur. Anyways, he comes in his night clothes, nightgown. And the guy who plays Filch looks like he's nearly dead. Okay? Go call the Earls of Surrey and of Warwick, but ere they come, bid them overread these letters. So he gives letters, and the page leaves. So what do we see? Page leaves, King's alone, soliloquy. It's the first time the King's had a soliloquy, if I remember correctly. There aren't many soliloquies in these plays. Major ones, Hal's first one in the first play, this in this play. How many thousand of my poorest subjects are at this hour asleep? Why does he think of his poorest subjects? O sleep, O gentle sleep, nature's soft nurse, how have I frighted thee that thou no more wilt weigh my eyelids down and steep my senses in forgetfulness? What does he mean? How have I frighted thee?
Can't sleep.
He can't sleep. How has he driven sleep away? That it will no longer do what? Weigh his eyelids down in forgetfulness. Why, rather, sleep, liest thou in smoky cribs, upon uneasy pallets stretching thee, and hushed with buzzing night flies to thy slumber, than in the perfumed chambers of the great, under the canopies of costly state, and lulled with sound of sweetest melody. He's comparing his sleeping chamber with the poorest of the poor, who have flies buzzing around. And you can go to some of the king's castles in England, go to Hampton Court, you can see the bed that King Henry VIII slept on, okay? You can go to, you can't see, you can't go into Buckingham Palace to where Charles and Camilla sleep or where his mother slept and stuff, but you can go to other palaces that kings have lived in and such. In, for example, the bed in Hampton Court, I'm not kidding, that sucker is like from the wall to about here, lengthwise, and about that wide. Covered with a canopy at the top, massive, like 6-inch thick posts on all four sides, with tapestries to cover to draw down. These aren't thin tapestries. These are like massive, thick quilts. Okay? He means I should be able to go to sleep because there's some guy over there playing a lute very gently and quietly, his white noise of the day. O thou dull God. Orpheus, the god of sleep. Notice he's dull. Why? Because he dulls you into sleep. Very few students actually fall asleep in my classes because usually I'm so loud and I change my pitch and intonation and everything. I've walked by colleagues' classes and it's like this. It's the Charlie Brown. Wah, 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 wah. I'm not kidding. I felt for those students. O thou dull God, why liest thou with thee vile in loathsome beds, and leave the kingly couch a watch case or a common alarm bell? Wilt thou upon the high and giddy mast seal up the ship boy's eyes? The kid sitting up in the crow's nest, and it would be a kid. They would send a young boy up there rather than a man. And rock his brains and cradle of the rude imperious surge and in the visitation of the winds, who take the ruffian billows by the top, curling their monstrous heads and hanging them with deafening clamor in the slippery clouds that with the hurly death itself awakes. You almost get the impression, okay? I'm not saying this is the case. I've never actually thought about it literally until just now. You almost get the impression that Shakespeare has been in one of those crow's nests. Like he knew what it was like to be up there while at sea, while the ship is rocking, fog's coming in, clouds are coming in, because the descriptions from other anecdotal descriptions of this experience, it nails it. It's either he experienced it or he had friends who had done that before, or someone he's talked to. Canst thou, O partial sleep? Why is sleep partial? Because it's given to you, but not to me. It's partial to you. Give thy repose to the wet sea boy in an hour so rude, and in the calmest and most stillest night, with all appliances and means to boot, deny it to a king. Come on, let me fall asleep. I don't know if you've ever suffered from insomnia, but late teens and most of my 20s, I know exactly what he's talking about. Then happy, low, lie down. Low born, low birth. Sleep. Go ahead. Uneasy, this is the thing. Uneasy lies the head that wears a crown. Why do they sleep so easy? They don't have to think of what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. They don't have to think about what's going on, I'm assuming for a moment that Henry IV liked Trump. They don't have to worry about the Democrats. They don't have to worry about judges. They don't have to worry about running a country. None of those cares. Okay? The head that wears the crown, there's a phrase that is going to be used in this play, and it's been used to describe all four of the plays in this tetralogy, The Hollow Crown. It's a great series, BBC productions of plays called The Hollow Crown, with Tom Hiddleston as Henry IV. Okay, look it up. I think some of it's available on YouTube.
What's it called?
The Hollow Crown. It's also available for purchase. I used to show clips of it until NBC, I think, filed a copyright infringement on my YouTube channel because I included clips of it. And I'm like, what the hell? This is educational. It's called fair use. Read the law. They eventually took the copyright thing down. So, Warwick, Surrey, Blunt come in. They say, many good morrows to your majesty. He says, is it tomorrow? He hasn't slept. 'Tis 1 o'clock. It is the morning. It's early in the morning. So, he asks, have you read the letters? These are the letters that he had the page deliver. Then you perceive the body of our kingdom. That is, you know the state. You know what's going on. How foul it is, what rank diseases grow, and with what danger near the heart of it. Shakespeare loves the image. He loves the phrase and the image of rank disease. What's he mean by rank?
Stinky.
Louder?
Stinky.
Stinky, rotted, foul. Okay? Warwick, it is. But as a body yet distempered, that is, it's not dead, it's ill, which to his former strength may be restored. With good advice and little medicine, my Lord Northumberland will soon be cooled. That is, Northumberland will calm down. He's angry now. Why? Because his son just died. Why is he suggesting that the Lord Northumberland will be cooled? It's the implication, because of his age, he won't get fired up real long. And I don't mean because of his age, because he's too old to fight. It means cooler heads will prevail. The wisdom of his age will say, calm down. King, oh God, that one might read the book of fate and see the revolution of the times make mountains level and the continent, weary of solid firmness, melt itself into the sea, and other times to see the beachy girdle of the ocean too wide for Neptune's hips, how chance mocks and changes fill the cup of alteration with divers liquors, In other words, if only I knew how this will play out. Right? What one seemingly little minor problem would Henry no longer have to deal with? His lack of sleep. It's one of the things keeping him awake. He goes on. If this were seen, if I knew how it was going to end. 54. The happiest youth, viewing his progress through. Okay, his progress through. I used that word progress a few weeks ago, talking about when somebody becomes a king, takes a progress, and goes throughout the kingdom, travels through it, sees and meets his people, gives them an opportunity to see him. Okay? He's saying the youth who does what? Makes a progress through these troubling times. If he could see the end point, if he could see how he makes his way through that, what perils past, what crosses to ensue, would shut the book and sit him down and die. Notice, viewing his progress through, he would do what? He wouldn't go, oh, well, this is a piece of cake. He would close the book. Why? Because seeing the problems he will have to overcome. Nope, too hard, too difficult. 'Tis not 10 years since Richard and Northumberland, great friends, did feast together. And in 2 years after were they at wars. 10 years ago, Northumberland was a great friend of King Richard II. 2 years after that, when I rose to power, Northumberland was at loggerheads. Bolingbroke would not have become king without the backing of Northumberland. It is but 8 years since this Percy, Northumberland, was the man nearest my soul. Nearest my soul implies what? People today would say soulmates. Maybe, not in a romantic sense. Band of brothers. Best of brothers. He was the one who had Henry's right shoulder. His right-hand man. Closest companion. 8 years ago. Who like a brother toiled in my affairs and laid his love and life under my foot. Northumberland was the one who prepared the way, I'm intentionally using biblical language there, for Bolingbroke to return from exile. Too early to return from exile. He was the one who argued to Richard II that Bolingbroke's lands, his Lancaster dukeship, should not be taken from him. That's why Bolingbroke comes back, now Henry IV. Toiled in my affairs, laid his love and life under my foot. Yea, for my sake, even to the eyes of Richard, gave him defiance. What does that mean, to the eyes of Richard? It means he looked Richard in the eyes. Little tidbit. Just before Shakespeare was born, during the reign of Henry VIII, it was a capital offense to look the king in the face. And if you weren't nobly born, you had to literally, when the king came by, if he was being carried on a carriage, when he became so grotesquely, obscenely fat he couldn't walk, or when he was young and was like Mel Gibson in his prime, or pick some other hunky Hollywood actor. When he would walk by, people had to literally face to the ground. Literally. Unless the king says, rise. And gives you permission to look at him in the face. Because if the king said rise and answer a question, if the king's over here, you kind of look this way. You don't look him directly in the face. Unless you're, close circle advisor, that kind of thing. He looked Richard in the face. Northumberland did. And he did speak these words. So, back up. gave him defiance. But which of you was by? And then he looks at Warwick. You, cousin Neville, another name. So Warwick is also cousin Neville. As I remember, you were there when Richard, with his eye brimful of tears, then checked and rated by Northumberland, did speak these words. So he is now quoting Richard II, king, to Northumberland. Northumberland, the latter by the which my cousin, because they were cousins, Bolingbroke ascends my throne. Notice it's a question mark. But it's an assertion also. Northumberland, you're the ladder by which this Bolingbroke will ascend my throne? Meaning, what will Bolingbroke do to Northumberland? He will step up and over him. What is Northumberland, according to Richard, for Bolingbroke? He's a stepping off point. You think you're helping him. You're just a tool. Though then, God knows. So now, that's the quote. So then Henry says, though then God knows, I had no such intent. Okay? But that necessity so bowed the state that I and greatness were compelled to kiss. What would it mean? Assume for a moment. Play a mind game. Henry says these words in a soliloquy rather than to people. What would it mean for Henry to say in a soliloquy, I had no such intent, but that necessity so bowed the state that I and greatness were compelled to kiss? What does he mean by greatness? The crown. If he said that in a soliloquy, what would it mean? He literally did not desire the crown. He did not want to become king. But it's not in a soliloquy. He's saying this to people. And whenever someone says something to another person, what may one always, at least partially, assume about what is being said? Is it always 100% truthful? Or is there always some element of self or ego involved? That is, some little bit of protection, some little bit of what St. Paul calls rhetoric, where you marshal your words and language to do what? To achieve a favorable end. Okay? Now, I am going to say this. If you go back and read Richard II, well, go back and read Richard II, not before this class is over or whatever, and decide for yourself, is what he says here true? Because he does say in the play, I don't want the kingship, I just want my lands. I want my inheritance. I want everything that by right of law is due to me. Okay? Richard doesn't agree. A lot of critics don't agree. A lot of critics think he's lying to get what he wants, which is ultimately the kingship and the kingdom. My own reading is I think he's telling the truth. Within the play, within the world of the play, I don't think Bolingbroke wants the kingship. It is kind of thrust upon him. He doesn't, go, no, I really can't. And, deny the option given to him a whole lot. It's kind of like, no, I can't. Oh, okay, I'll take it. So there's some ambiguity, which is why, I mentioned before, my major professor thought Henry IV was very Nixonian, very much like Nixon. Okay, so he goes on. But the necessity so bowed the state that I and greatness were compelled to kiss. So he then quotes Richard again. So after thee, Northumberland, thou ladder by the which my cousin Bolingbroke ascends my throne, Richard then said, the time shall come, the time will come, that foul sin gathering head shall break into corruption. Foul sin, right? Because sin is foul. It's not good, fair, true, beautiful. Gathering head, meaning getting bigger, larger, more expansive, full of itself, prideful, arrogant, all that kind of stuff. It will do what? It will break like a blister into corruption. And what, metaphorically now, what's going to happen when that boil, all the infectious stuff will leach out. Okay? So went on foretelling this time's condition and the division of our amity. What's amity? It's French. Friendship. We were friends. Henry was friends with all these other guys who are now opposed to him. Okay? Warwick. And I know I'm taking a long time to cover this stuff. There is a history in all men's lives, figuring the nature of the times deceased. Okay. There is a history in all men's lives that does what? It figures. It gives shape and body to. It presents an image of what? The past times. What is Warwick, aka Shakespeare? What is Shakespeare saying through Warwick? George Santayana's famous quote. That's too long to read. Those who do not learn the lessons of history, what? Are doomed to repeat them. Need proof? World War I, Treaty of Versailles. 20 years later, 19 years later, World War II. World War II began with the signing of Treaty of Versailles. Literally. Why? We rubbed Germany's face in the mess they created. Okay? That's why at the end of World War II, what did we, the Allies, do instead? You know, Trump's talking about tariffs and everything today and says we want reciprocal tariffs. We want, if another country is going to charge us a tariff, we're going to charge them equal tariff. Anybody knows where those tariffs originally came from? The tariffs that Europe charges the United States? It's mind-blowing. End of World War II. Those were tariffs we agreed to. Those were tariffs we essentially put on ourselves. Why? Europe was decimated. It had nothing. So we agreed to pay for them to buy our stuff. And the tariffs have never been done away with. That's why Trump is doing that. What's he talking about here? We see the times of the past. Rebellion, Richard II, Henry IV, rebellion. The which observe, that is, if we pay attention to those figures, to those images, a man may prophesy with a near aim of the main chance of things as yet not come to life. If we learn from that, we can do what? We can then turn from where we are now and look forward and say what might happen and probably get pretty close. To go back to modern politics and stuff. Why does NATO exist? What was NATO's purpose when it was first created in the 1950s? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It was to defend the quote-unquote Western countries against the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. It's satellite countries behind, to use Churchill's term, the Iron Curtain. Is there a Warsaw Pact? Is there Soviet Union today? Nope, that all ended in 1990. So why does NATO still exist? I'm not getting into the politics of it. There are those who say, well, we need to keep NATO alive. Why? Because there's still Russia. What's the fear? We retract NATO, we dissolve NATO, the United States focuses on itself. What's the fear? Well, what happened before? The Soviet Union, Russia, will try to expand. So, keep the alliance. Keep that from happening. In other words, we're looking at the figures of the past and we're saying, if we don't maintain, this is what's going to happen. Such things become the hatch and brood of time. The hatch, the eggs hatching, and the brood, the stuff that comes out. And by the necessary form of this, King Richard might create a perfect guess that great Northumberland then falls to him. What's his point? What does he go on to say? Might do what? Would of that seed, what seed? The seed of falseness to Richard grow to a greater falseness. To whom? You, O king. If Richard couldn't trust him, how much less can you trust him? We should not find a ground to root upon unless on you. Okay? Good advice or bad advice on Warwick's part? Or let me rephrase that. Foolish advice or prudent advice? King, are these things then necessities? What is a necessity? What does necessity mean? Something you need. It's more than that, though. It's something that cannot be changed. It's something that will not change. It's something that no matter what, you have to, I won't wear it because it's full of holes. Keep calm and carry on. I've got to keep calm and carry on shirt. That, or to use another phrase from British culture, grin and bear it. That is, you have to suffer through something that you cannot change. Chaucer is the first one who actually said, we must learn to make a virtue of necessity. What does that mean? Every one of us has to go through crap in our lives. We can't avoid it. So, you have to make a virtue of it. That is, you have to try to turn something good out of that bad. A horrible experience. You try to find the good in it. You try to find behind that massive dark cloud a little silver lining. Of course, a friend of mine's family says, yeah, but behind every silver lining, there's a massive black cloud. You know, glass half full kind of thing. That's what he's saying. That's what he's asking. Are these things then necessities? He's asking, is there any way that we can have peace? Or is rebellion already, is the die already cast, to quote Caesar? Then let us meet them like necessities. If we have to go to war, by God, we're going to war. George Bush's shock and awe. If we got to go to Baghdad, we're going to level. You know, it's that mentality. And that same word even now cries out on us. What same word? Probably cry havoc, let loose the dogs of war, which we're going to hear said, we aren't because I've dropped the play, in Henry V. As Hal prepares to forego all Christian charity when he lays siege to Harfleur. Kill everyone, he says. Not just the soldiers. Women, children, the old, the infirm, kill them all. Our Hal, the flighty, hangs around with Falstaff. He does that for one reason. He's telling the emissary for Harfleur, the city, unless you surrender, everyone will die. And he's like, okay, we give. They say the bishop in Northumberland are 50,000 strong. Can't be. Warwick. Can't be. Rumor doth double. 25. Like the voice and echo, the numbers of the feared. Go to bed. Peace. Go to bed. The king's worried about what? Civil war. You know, there's all the talk about how much disunited everything the country is and such. Idiots on left and right are saying, we've never seen the country so divided. Really? Go back to 1860. Country was a hell of a lot more divided than it is today. The highest number of mortalities or fatalities in war the United States has ever suffered was brother against brother. It wasn't Vietnam, it wasn't World War I, World War II. Warwick, go to bed. Upon my soul, my Lord, the powers that you already have sent forth shall bring this prize in very easily. What are the powers he's already sent forth? John of Lancaster, with Westmoreland, and that great mighty warrior, Falstaff, who's going to be involved, okay? He says, I've received a certain instance that Glendower is dead. Okay, do we know that that's true, or is it just a rumor? He doesn't say, I've heard from someone who was there, but even that would be what? Hearsay. And these unseasoned hours perforce must add unto your sickness, that is, and if you don't get your sleep, you won't get any better. I will take your counsel. And were these inward wars once out of hand, we would, dear lords, unto the Holy Land. Which is what he was talking about at the beginning of first part. Why does he want to go to the Holy Land? There's two reasons. One, to get the Muslims out, the Saracens, the Moors. Two, for penance. Henry talks about wanting to do penance. He needs to cleanse his soul. He's confessed it already. Now he has to do something to show to God, I mean it. And that is to go on a pilgrimage to the greatest pilgrimage site for Christians. Okay? So, skip 3:2. We're skipping 3:2. We're skipping largely the scenes that show Falstaff with Mistress Quickly and Doll and etc. Okay? Why? Because they kind of act like antitypes of the scene you've just seen. What do I mean by that? You have the king with his council, Council, and then you have Falstaff with his council. And Falstaff is like the king in the whorehouse or in the tavern. Okay? So go to 4:1. What time is it? 11:18. We might actually, we won't finish. 4:1. We now have the Archbishop of York, Mowbray, Lord Bardolph, distinguishing him from Falstaffian Bardolph, Hastings, and others. And they're in the forest of Galtree. Okay? So we start talking, what's this place called? He tells them, and the Archbishop says, line 3, here stand my lords, and sin discovers forth to know the numbers of our enemies. That is, let's all stay here, let's keep our troops here, hidden in the forest. You don't want the enemies to know your strength. And do what? Let's send out some scouts. Let's find out how large Henry's forces are. Archbishop, 'tis well done. Hastings, we've already done that. Archbishop, good job. My friends and brethren, in these great affairs, I must acquaint you that I have received new dated letters from Northumberland. That is, I've got an update. Their cold intent, tenor, and substance thus. That is, the cold intent, tenor, and substance of the letters. Why is it cold? Now, my gloss says, because it makes the Archbishop feel cold. It cools his attitude, his desires, his hopes. Could be that. He's getting ready to march into battle. How do you want his attitudes, desires, and hopes to be? You want him to be on fire. It's a damper, in other words. Could be that, or it could be the intent behind the letters is cold. Northumberland is cold towards their plot. Again, not giving off heat, not inspiring. Here doth he wish his person with such powers as might hold sortance with his quality, the which he could not levy. What does that mean, he could not levy? What does it mean to levy an army? It's to raise one up. Northumberland doesn't have troops that he provisions and houses and garrisons all the time. For him to go to war in Galtree Forest, he has to get men from every part of his estate, which the estate of Northumberland is very large. It's almost the entire county, okay? But he has to raise this army in order to go to war, just like the king has to, all right? He wants to be here. He really wishes he could be here, but he can't raise an army. Darn. Whereupon he is retired. That is, he hasn't retired within his fortress of Alnwick Castle. He is retired to Scotland. He's not even going to protect his own fortress personally. He's going off to Scotland to ripe his growing fortunes. That is, he's going there until his fortunes grow ripe, until they develop, until he can do what? What does that really mean? To see which way the battle's going to go. And concludes, the letters conclude, in hearty prayers, that is, yea, God, defend and protect them, bless their endeavor, that your attempts may overlive the hazard and fearful meeting of their opposite. And he says, may God bless you as you go wage war against the king. Mowbray. That's how that B-R-A-Y, by the way, would be pronounced. Bree. Thus do the hopes we have in him touch ground and dash themselves to pieces. Well, where should hopes be? Up here, right? Like balloons. If I say I'm going to pop your balloon, what's it mean? I'm dashing your hopes. Another messenger comes in. Now, what news? Does it mean that, or does it mean, now what news? Because the news you just got is not good. About a mile away, west of this forest, is the enemy. And I'd say they're about 30,000. The just proportion that we gave them out, Mowbray says. Let us sway on and face them in the field. Archbishop, what leader leads them? What well-appointed leader fronts us here? Why? Because when he says that, somebody comes riding up. It's Westmoreland, one of the king's most trusted guides and aides. If we were doing Henry V, and it really bugs me that we're not, we would hear at one point Westmoreland ask a question just before the famous Battle of Agincourt about, oh, if only we had 10,000 more men. And Hal, Prince Hal, do I have time to say this? Yeah, what the hell? Gives a speech then where he says, He's the king. It's called the St. Crispin Day speech. See if I can find it real quickly. Act 4, Scene 3. Westmoreland says, "Oh, that we now had here but 1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today." The king, it's one of Shakespeare's greatest speeches, and it's considered oddly enough, one of the greatest speeches in history, even though it was never actually delivered. It's all a fiction. Okay? "What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland. No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor." It's an old English idea. We see it in what's called the Battle of Maldon, an Anglo-Saxon poem, where all the English die, by the way. "The fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost, that is, drains my purse. It yearns me not if men my garments wear, such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending soul alive. No, faith, my cuz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as one man more. Methinks would share from me for the best hope I have. Do not wish one man more, rather proclaim it, Westmoreland. Through my host, so through my army, proclaim this, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart." And in most film versions, there's a slight pause, and you see a couple men leave. "His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us." This day is called the Feast of Crispin. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispin. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, "Tomorrow is St. Crispin." Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, "These wounds I had on Crispin's day." Old men forget. Hold on a second. Save that spot. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot. But he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth, as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered, that is, drinking toasts to each of them individually. That's why they're flowing cups. This story shall the good man teach his son. And Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. What's he saying there? What has the king just equated himself with? Everybody who goes to this battle, whether they live or die, we're brothers. I've never been in war. I've got a good friend who was in the Battle of Fallujah. Lost a lot of friends. My uncle was. He suffered nightmares the rest of his life because he was one of those who went in the caves of Okinawa. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. You don't get more powerful than that. Back to this passage. So, Westmoreland says, this is the same Westmoreland that the king is referring to there, responding to. Health and fair greeting from our General the Prince, Lord John, and Duke of Lancaster. Okay? So he's now an emissary for a teenager. All right? The Archbishop, say on, my Lord of Westmoreland. That is, why are you here? So, he comes in and offers what? He says, it's to you, your grace, that is the Archbishop, do I in chief address the substance of my speech. If that rebellion came like itself in base and abject routes, led on by bloody youth guarded with rags and countenanced by boys in beggary, I say, if damned commotion so appeared in his true, native, and most proper shape, you, reverend father, and these noble lords had not been here to dress the ugly form of base and bloody insurrection with your fair honors. What does he mean by your fair honors? You guys are highborn. You're noble. How should rebellion be portrayed? It's base, it's common. A common figure for Satan in literature isn't, the goat with the horns and the pitchfork. It's like a toad. Base, in mire. You, Lord Archbishop. And what else does he mean by that? It's because of your honors, because of your standing, your social status, that what? People flock to you. He goes on. You, Lord Archbishop, whose see, that is his archiepiscopal see, the seat of his bishopric, is by civil peace maintained, whose beard the silver hand of peace hath touched, that is, he's old, whose learning and good letters peace have tutored, whose white vestments figure innocence, the dove and very blessed spirit of peace. Wherefore do you so ill translate yourself? And by translate, he says, you turn from one thing into another. Out of the speech of peace that bears such grace into the harsh and boisterous tongue of war, turning your books to graves, your ink to blood, your pens to lances, and your tongue divine, the mouth of God, to a loud trumpet and point of war. You could rephrase all of that to, how dare you, as a quote-unquote man of God, to do what? To start a war. Archbishop, wherefore do I this? Why? To this end, we are all diseased. Now, the we there doesn't only mean the Archbishop and his compatriots. He means we, all of England. And with our surfeiting and wanton hours have brought ourselves into a burning fever, and we must bleed for it, of which disease our late King in Richard, being infected, died. He died from this disease. What's the disease? Yes, civil discord, lack of harmony, lack of amity, lack of unity, lack of friendship.
So lack of something.
All those things, though.
Yeah.
The country's divided. 2025, the country's divided. He's saying this has got to be resolved. He's going to discuss how in a moment. So he says, but my most noble Lord of Westmoreland, I take not on me here as a physician, that is to diagnose, nor do I as an enemy to peace troop in the throngs of military men, but rather show alike fearful war, to diet rank minds sick of happiness and purge the obstructions which begin to stop the very lanes of life. Hear me more clearly, or more plainly. I have an equal balance, scales, justly weighed what wrongs our arms, our forces, may do, what wrongs we suffer, that is from your king, and find our griefs heavier than our offense. In other words, balance must be achieved. The wrongs against us weigh down much, much more than any wrongs that we might do. Okay? We see which way the stream of time doth run, and are enforced from our most quiet there by the rough torrent of occasion. In other words, it's almost like they overheard the conversation between the king and his advisors, talking about the figure of time past and how you can use it to predict what's coming. We've seen what the times are, he says. And here's the summary of all our griefs. When time shall serve to show in articles, which long ere this we offered to the king. In other words, we've written our Declaration of Independence. We've given our lists of griefs and complaints. And might by no suit gain our audience. The king wouldn't listen to us. He wouldn't even allow us an audience with him. When we are wronged and would unfold our griefs, we are denied access unto his person. What's the First Amendment guarantee? The right of peaceable assembly to do what? To petition the government for grievances. I think Jefferson knew this play inside and out. He doesn't only get that from political history. Even by those men that most have done us wrong. The dangers of the days but newly gone, whose memory is written on the earth with yet appearing blood. In other words, you can go see the blood. And the example of every minute's instance present now, hath put on us these ill-beseeming arms. What's he essentially saying? You forced our hand. Because you, as the emissary of the king, wouldn't even hear our complaints. Westmoreland. When was your appeal denied? And what that really means is, when was your appeal made? Wherein have you been galled by the king? What peer hath been suborned to grate on you, that you should seal this lawless bloody book of forged rebellion with a seal divine? Why? Because he's archbishop. And consecrate commotion's bitter edge. He says the Commonwealth, it's a brother born, etc. I make my quarrel in particular. That is, I've made my appeal publicly known. He hasn't said, I went knocking on the door of the king to address it. Okay? Go back for a moment to 1 Henry Part 4. What does the king offer before the Battle of Shrewsbury? It was a quiz question. Mercy is one thing. That's one of the two you had to mention in order to get it right. And he would listen to their grievances. He offers not to fight. And he says, in those grievances that are valid, I will redress them. And he also offers mercy or pardon. What do Worcester and Vernon, I think it is, tell Hotspur? The exact opposite. It's because of their lies that the battle is fought. Now, we don't know if the king is actually being truthful in all that. He may not be. Okay? So they go back and forth. And they start talking, beginning 103, Westmoreland does, start talking about, again, history, the past. Westmoreland speaks to Mowbray. He says, oh my good Lord Mowbray, line 104, construe the times to their necessities. Construe, interpret the times according to what things must be, things that must happen. And you shall say, indeed, it is the time, and not the king that doth you injuries. It's the time, it's the present, not the particular king. Yet for your part, it not appears to me, either from the king or in the present time, that you should have an inch of any ground to build a grief on. Were you not restored to all the Duke of Norfolk seigniories, your noble and right remembered fathers? And what he's alluding to there is an event that happens in Richard II. The Duke of Norfolk in Richard II is the one who gets banished along with Henry Bolingbroke, the Duke of Norfolk, gets banished for life. However, he is more in the wrong than Henry Bolingbroke. And what Westmoreland says here is, you, the son of that duke, have now been restored to your father's prior holdings. Everything that had been your father's is now yours. When Richard banished him, he took those. Okay? Who restored them? Henry IV. One thing in honor, it was an honor because it was a challenge between Norfolk and Bolingbroke, and knights accept the challenges. What thing in honor had my father lost that need to be revived and breathed in me? That is, my father lost it, not me. Well, Bolingbroke could say, not quite the same, but Hal could. The king that loved him as the state stood then was perforce compelled to banish him. So they go on. Westmoreland. Mowbray gives the speech. Westmoreland replies, you speak now you know not what. How does Westmoreland know that? The implication is Mowbray is young. Westmoreland was there. Okay? The Earl of Hereford was reputed then in England the most valiant gentleman. Who was the Earl of Hereford? Bolingbroke. His father was John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster. Okay? When John of Gaunt died, Richard II took all of his holdings, all of his land, everything. That's what makes Bolingbroke come back, so that he can become heir and then Duke of Lancaster. Okay? So he says, Henry, back then, was in England the most valiant gentleman, blah, 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 blah. But if your father had been victor there, he goes on. So, here come I, 141. Here come I from our princely general, that is, not the king, Prince John, to know your griefs. So, you say you've got grievances. Let me know what they are. To tell you from his grace, Prince John, that he will give you audience. And wherein it shall appear that your demands are just, if your demands are just, you shall enjoy them. That is, you will get what you want. Everything set off that might so much as think you enemies. Well, but he's forced us to compel this offer. And it proceeds from policy, not love. Policy, planning. Westmoreland. Mowbray, you overween to take it so. You overween, you're overthinking it. This offer comes from mercy, not from fear. That is, when he says he is forced to compel us to make this offer, he's saying Prince John feels that for his own defense, he must do this. No. This is an offer of love, of mercy, Westmoreland says. Our battle is more full of names than yours. That is, we've got greater, better named warriors than you do. Our men more perfect in the use of arms, our armor all as strong. Our cause the best, that is, and we are on the side of right. Why would their arms, soldiers be better? They're associated with the king's household. Mowbray's and archbishops, who are most of his soldiers? The majority. Now, it might be 51%, but the majority. Who are they going to be? They're not going to be trained warriors. Farmers, peasants. The kind of people we see Falstaff press into service. Missing a hand, missing an eye, lame. Okay? 1144. So we're not going to admit to a parley, that is an agreement. Westmoreland, that argues but the shame of your offense. A rotten case abides no handling. That is, you're not willing to put it to the test. Hastings, Hath the prince, John, Hastings wants to get to the point. Does the prince have the authority of the king to do this? That's what it means by a full commission. In very ample virtue of his father, in place of his father, or in the power of his father, to hear and absolutely to determine of what conditions we shall stand upon. Yes. When the prince speaks, it's as if King Henry IV is speaking. Okay? Archbishop, okay, take this, and he gives them all the list of grievances. We'll stop there and we'll pick up that same scene with around probably line 184 or so on today's Wednesday, on Monday. I will go ahead and I'll put up a quiz for Acts 1 through 3. Yeah, that'll be good. Of Acts 1 through 3. But it'll only be the Acts we've discussed. It won't cover all the Falstaff stuff.
Are we going to talk about the paper here in April?
Yes, I will. Remind me on Monday, because we should finish this without any problem.